Okay, so a brief rundown as to what Amy is like with no roses, with red, with white, and with purple. So Amy, when she has no roses, has a lot of good speed, still has these parries that work on the different hit levels, has really good pokes, but doesn't really have a lot of range, doesn't really have, and certainly doesn't have any kind of damage whatsoever. Um, you know, a pretty typical AAA. To kind of give you an idea, the typical whiff punish, like universally, would be 2-2B, 6-6, B plus K6, into a red rose like that. That's 44 damage. And that's how you do like the combo ender. So what happens when you have red rose? That's purple. When you have red roses. So when you have red roses, instead of getting just like the pop-up rose that you get from AMSA plus B, now it's a break attack. One of the main things that happens when you get red is that a lot of your strings end in break attacks as opposed to just regular damage. So there was 44 damage initially, right? 2-2B, exact same combo. 73 damage. Yeah. So you go from a Whiff Punisher in the 40s to a Whiff Punisher in the 70s, which for a character that's this fast, not to mention 2-2B is safe on block, has a little bit of tech crouching, though it's entirely not reliable, and has massive hitboxes, very, very difficult to deal with. A 73 damage Whiff Punisher for a character like this, very, 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 very good, right? So, no roses. You've got 4A. 4A is an unseeable low that's a horizontal, and it's neutral on hit, which means that it creates a reverse mix-up situation with your parries, right? Now, that's pretty good. Minus 20 is it's about as punishable as it gets for most characters, much less Amy. So one of the best moves that she gets when she has red roses is 4AA. Pretty solid damage for a unseeable horizontal low, right? 28 damage. It goes from minus 20 to minus 16, so still decently punishable, but the difference between minus 16 and minus 20 can matter a lot for certain characters, for instance, Cervantes. But the main thing to note is just the range. Look at how far that is. An unseeable low that goes that far away. Not only that, but look how far away I am, like, that's with one backdash. Look how far away. I'm like 4 character lengths away. So the reason why a lot of people, including myself, go for red so quickly is because having the ability to have 4AA, arguably one of the best moves in the entire game, just so heavily increases Amy's ability to mix, to poke, to be strong in the mid-range neutral game. So a ton of characters, Taki, Cassandra, Mitsu, Yoshi, a lot of these characters go from I'm chasing them to now they're chasing me, and they have to get through this. A move that they arguably, some characters can't even punish all that well. So that's one of the main buffs that Amy gets with Red Rose. One of my favorite things, so without Red, AAA, a very typical AAA. It's minus 12 on block, it's punishable, but with Red Rose, you get significantly more damage. It's minus 6 on block, as opposed to minus 12. They cut it in half, so it's not actually punishable at all. And on counter hit, it's like plus 8 on hit. It's huge. I spam this to no tomorrow, especially if you're not a character that has tech crouches. Another big buff that you get, so 4B, with no roses, does like an okay amount of damage. It's a vertical. It can hit grounded, but it doesn't really do all that much, and it has like this odd curve of a rose that they can potentially get hit by. But if you have red already, 4BB. It's 52 damage. It picks up off the ground. It's minus 10, so the majority of the cast can't even punish it, and it basically is traded in for most of your, combo enders. So if I catch a mid parry, 40 damage. If I have red, 68 damage. It's going to be a little bit less if I actually connect with the parry, because they did nerf that, but that's neither here nor there. Also, when you don't have red, like if you catch a high parry, you got 37 damage. If you have red, 72 damage. 72 damage for parrying a high off of a vertical that's -6 on block. That's not nothing, you know? So as you can kind of tell, when Amy has no roses, basically the entirety of her combo enders and all of her neutral game and virtually everything is all about trying to get roses. That's one of the problems. So when I have... So the absolute max damage that I can get off of a move like this is 30 damage. 30 damage for a -18 vertical low that I have to be literally point blank range in order to get. Still relatively good because it's an unseeable low, but 30 damage when you're risking such a heavy price can be pretty... It can be tough to condition somebody. But if I already have red, 45 damage for the exact same amount of risk, right? Or I could even use soul attack to potentially create an even better situation for me. So I can even get something like that. You don't need Red Rose in order to create that kind of situation, but it is still important to note that it's so much better once you have red. 6/6 BA is another thing. So that's not really all that great of a string. It doesn't really do all that much damage, and the second hit is a high. Knocks down, but it's a techable knockdown, so not really all that great. But when you have red, it becomes a break attack. That also then combos into 4BB. Again, a relatively solid punish. At that point, you have one of the better -16 punishes in the game. 6XB is 16. Not to mention, it's something that you can do from crouch. So, punishing grabs, punishing as well Axlow, punishing stuff that forces crouch in any way, shape, or form. Now you have a pretty solid way of punishing that, right? So that's the majority of the stuff that you get from red. I might be forgetting something, but I don't think I am. So let's talk about white. So with White Rose, one of the main reasons why you get white is to have, effectively, if you know Street Fighter at all, this is the most uppercut similar move in Soul Calibur. It is a massive range move that is I-14, so pretty fast. Look how far away I can be and still catch him. And it gives you like this really solid launcher. If you can kind of see, there's this White Rose that hits for the second hit, and that can potentially catch sidestep as well, so it's a pretty solid hitbox. It's just the thing is that it's massively punishable on block, like launcher unsafe. So it's about as uppercutty as possible, right? It's also important to note that it doesn't do like a solid amount of damage. I mean, you know, for what it is, it's a pretty good amount of damage, but it gives you a free red. One thing to note about white is that the second that you get white, so if you get red, white is still going to be just as difficult as it was before. But when you get white, red is practically an inevitability, because now literally everything you do combos into a Red Rose. So the second that you get, so there's such a thing as a red-only Amy player, like myself, and there's such a thing as a purple Amy player, like you would see from Sandman or something like that. But, there's really no such thing as a white-only Amy. That doesn't really make sense. You might remember me talking about 4A, which gives you a pretty solid situation here. So if you are trying to catch somebody trying to backstep out of your 4As, then you can start doing your uppercuts. Stuff like that, right? The other main thing to note about white, you do get stuff like this, without white, you get 4/4B, which doesn't actually backswing all that much, and it is punishable on block, but if you get white, then it combos into something like this, which is just 4/4B, B, 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 B. It's a really crazy amount of damage for what it is. Could potentially give you a ring out or a wall splat and stuff, but I haven't really found a solid use for a move like that. It's not really all that strong. The two main reasons why you get white, again, is the uppercut, and the other thing is the buff that you get on the parries. So, if I have no white, and I just have... Or if I have red, right? I've got the same parries. They work on the different hit levels, high, mid, or low. They come out in 4 frames, and they last from frame 4 to 14. So it's a 10-frame window for something like that. If I have white, and you can kind of tell that I have... Even if you don't have the counter, you can kind of tell that I have white, because you see all those like little white flower petals. The parries start on frame 2, which means they are just as fast as a normal GI. So any of your normal strings where you can only GI to give yourself like kind of a pseudo / not very good like reverse mix-up situation. Now Amy has a guaranteed combo, and it's a pretty massive combo too. So it starts on frame 2 and it lasts until frame 22, that is. So no roses, 4 to 14, white roses, frame 2 to 22. It doubles the window. It doubles the frame window for the parry. So it's one of those situations where to even try to punish her whiffing a parry is very difficult, because the window lasts for so long that the animation of her actually doing the parry kind of stops. It's to the point where, like, for that just 1 or 2 frames where that high parry animation is going, the mid parry is still active. It's gonna be very tricky to try and punish somebody who's trying to stance, like, parry dance the way that you see a lot of white Amy players do. Now, one of the other main things is that in every single parry, you can cancel an AMS to go for like an AMS grab or anything else that you get normally in AMS. Or you have your A, your B, and your K, depending on which parry hit level you're going for. You got low parry K, low parry B, which isn't really all that useful, low parry A, which is super duper useful, all that kind of stuff, right? When you have white roses, there is a move within each parry hit level that will give you a lethal hit the first time you hit with it once you get white roses. So, with no roses or with red, low parry A, which is like this sweeping, very, very far, safe, horizontal mid, right? It's pretty solid, because the idea of low parry is the fact that, like, this is an unseeable low, but it's a vertical. Like, you can step this. And so what a lot of people do is that they react to the animation of her low parry and then try to sidestep, right? So what I tend to do is I will try and kind of go through stance and then use an amount of time where I stall for the low parry animation so that my opponent gauges that I'm going into low parry into the horizontal, right? And it gives me a relatively solid amount of damage for, what it is, and I can do that from really far away and stuff like that. But if I have white, gives me a lethal hit the first time that I hit with it. It's not going to give it to me again, because that would be super de-duper, deluxe a la Peter T. Hooper broken. But to give you an idea, in terms of like the combo damage that you get off of it as well, so if you look at mid parry B, so I get like 34 damage. It's not really like much of anything, right? But when I have white, there's a combo extension that goes to red, right? 59 damage, that's not nothing. Just on its own, that's pretty crazy, and it's something that you can do off of AMSB as well. So if I, step a vertical, imagine taking that much damage and I get a red rose when you have a situation like that. That's pretty crazy, but it effectively gives me the ability to use mid parry B as a combo extender anytime that I catch them with a lethal hit for the white rose low parry. So with the combo you're going to be looking at is, as opposed to getting like the 27 damage that I get when I just regularly hit with it, safe horizontal that goes from mid-range, 85 damage, plus a red rose. So that's not even technically max damage. If I have red, so aka I have purple, that's a lot more damage. To kind of give you an idea as to some of the other stuff, mid-parry kick will give you like a rose like that, or like that, something like that. It is minus 12 on block, so it's normally not really all that safe to do. But if I have white, $71 damage. Now, it is again important to note that if I connected with the mid-parry, then it's going to do significantly less, because the biggest nerf that Amy has ever received is that they significantly nerfed the amount of damage Amy can obtain when she connects with a mid-parry, which is a nerf that I don't really agree with, if only because if I don't connect with the mid-parry, like if I don't mid-parry something and they just get hit like Gro just did now, then I get the full amount of damage. And I really feel like it should be reversed. I feel like Amy should be rewarded for connecting with a mid-parry as opposed to being rewarded for not connecting on one. Seems a little bit fishy. Anyway, That's one of her other major combos, right? High parry B. Can give you like 37. Plus a rose, something like that. Let's say I have red. $72, pretty crazy good amount of damage. If I have white. That is 92 damage. So that's the kind of stuff that white gets you. So you've seen what white can do, and you've seen what red can do, and now let's talk about purple. So purple is kind of what you would expect. It's when you get 4 of each red and white roses, and it's basically just an amalgamation of all the different moves that both of them give you. Because the thing of it is that white rose and red rose moves chain together very, very well. So remember what I was talking about before when it came to like 4AA, or like just 4A into like 214B, like stuff like that. Very, very good backdash killer, and like potentially give you a red rose. Now, from crouch or from really far away, my minus 14 punish... Whoop, that's not right. Minus 14 punish from far away or from crouch is 58. It's the best I-14 punish basically in the game. Let's say my opponent puts themselves at minus 16, or I duck a grab and I was 100% sure about it. 80 damage on a minus 16 punish, the best I-16 punish in the game. Let's say I haven't done any of my parries yet. $92 damage off of, again, a safe, long-range horizontal mid that they're probably going to get hit by just due to the fact that, they're worried about low parry K, right? Pretty insane stuff. Let's talk about the supers. So when you have no roses, Amy has 2 CEs that she can do. She can do a red rose CE, she can do a white rose CE. Can't really tell the difference when you don't have either rose. The red rose CE, it comes out in 16 frames, and when you don't have red, it does an okay amount of damage. 66 damage, which is okay for an I-16 CE. If you have red, it'll do significantly more than you would normally expect from an I-16. And you hear those like extra sound effects and stuff like that. 80 damage. 80 damage on an I-16 CE. So, basically okay. It is also important to note that Amy's CEs outside of purple really aren't that great, if only because the range is pretty small. So let's talk about white. So the white CE comes out in 12 frames. So it's, one of the fastest CEs that you can have. So you can, potentially block punish with it. But when you don't have white, does 50 damage. Not really all that great. You can combo in certain spots with it, but it's really not necessarily something to use. If you have white, though, it'll do basically what you would expect from an I-12 CE. $65 damage. Pretty good for an I-12, right? It is also important to note that for one reason or another, when you have white roses, the red rose CE also becomes I-12. I don't know why that's the case, but it is. When you have purple CE, it is the best CE in the entire game. The reason for that is... Let's talk about the damage first. That is a 90 damage CE. The other thing that I want to talk about is the fact that it is an I-12 CE. It is an I-12, 90 damage CE. It's also important to note that it recovers your guard gauge a little bit. It's also important to note that you gain 1/4 of a bar of meter whenever you hit with it. It's also important to note that the opponent loses 1/4 of a bar whenever you hit with it. So it has like that vampiric aspect to it. It's the best CE in the game. Once you're dealing with an Amy that has purple CE, it is one of, if not the absolute most terrifying things you have to worry about, is purple CE. You know, as I've said before, No Rose Amy, probably the worst character in the game. Not a lot of damage. Has good tools, but never really gets heavily rewarded for it. Purple Amy is the best character in the game. As in her own tier list, she has the best punishes in the game. She's still just as fast as she was before, except now she has more damage than basically anybody in the cast. Hits harder than Nightmare. Alright, so let's say I have meter and I go for like the high parry B. So you did a high, right? Like you tried to do like an AA. That's 120 damage. Plus I healed my guard gauge. Plus you lost bar. Plus I gained back bar. And why? Because like you tried to like punish 6-6A and I caught your like AA. Now the craziest thing that they did for Amy in Season 2 is that her parries, once you get purple, become reverse or resist impacts. So once you have purple, all these parries that again come out on frame 2 can also parry break attacks and unblockables and give you the lethal hits and all kinds of crazy stuff. It's amazing. You would see like what she can do in purple and you'd be like, whoa, that's unreasonable. That's basically what she gets out of her roses. I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting anything. Oh, I mean, we might as well talk about what she gets in Soul Charge as well. So if she has no roses, this is the stuff that she gets in Soul Charge when she has that do not require roses whatsoever. The kind of stuff that she gets really isn't all that interesting. So without Soul Charge, 6BB, but when I have Soul Charge going, 6BBB, gives you a red rose. Gives you a red rose, it's safe, it's a knockdown, it's all vertical, but, you know, gives you a knockdown and can get you a red rose, right? Now, the AMS grabs, which are just pretty good command grabs, do stuff like that. Now, if I have Soul Charge going, slightly different animation, and it gives you a red rose. And it puts you, as you can kind of tell by the distance, it puts you in a perfect position for a good Oki situation. If your opponent isn't aware of the Oki situation, you can catch them with a 4B. If they are aware of the situation, you can start going into stance parries and stuff like that. So, you know, that's one of the things that you get. AMSKA, you know, potentially good like ring out kind of thing. It's kind of like her max damage ability to do out of combos when you don't have roses. It's okay. AMSKAB is another way of getting roses. One of the major weaknesses of Amy Soul Charge is that it seems like, for the most part, what the developers want you to do with Amy Soul Charge is get more roses with it. But if you think about it, Amy is trying to get roses in order to get damage in order to win the game, right? Then you take a character like Mina, or Aswell, or Nightmare, or the majority of the cast. They get Soul Charge to win the game. You see what I mean? Like, they skip a lot of steps that Amy can't skip. So if you're using your Soul Charge to try and get roses, you're kind of in a bad way, because your amount of damage and your mix-ups and everything are just not really being optimized. It's kind of a last-ditch effort to ensure that you're going to be able to compete in the damage race against your opponent. And it's also important to note that one of the other major weaknesses is the fact that all the ways of getting red roses, or all the ways of getting roses that are unique to Soul Charge give you a red rose as opposed to a white rose, which is kind of unfortunate, seeing as how red is the easier rose to get. So chances are you're already going to have red rose. So let's talk about what you get when you have red roses. So as I've talked about before, you get this AMS A plus B, which does a combo's worth amount of damage just on its own. So if I have Soul Charge and red rose already, $95 damage. That is a move that picks up off the ground and is safe, and is obviously going to beat GIs and REs because it's a break attack. And it's also going to tech crouch under somebody trying to go for like an AA or something like that, right? So pretty massive. The developers have said that they wanted it to do just as much as a typical CE. Why they wanted that to be the case, don't worry about it. One of the other things that you get, as we talked about for AA, on counter hit, you also get for AAAA, right? You get a knockdown, it could potentially wall bounce, you can get a pretty good combo out of the wall bounce. The only weakness of it is that the second 2 hits are unsafe, and a portion of it is going to be high at the end. Low, low, high, high. So you could duck and punish it. You could just regularly block it. It's minus 12, so maybe you get something, maybe you don't. The only issue is that you're going to see a lot of Amy players fake confirm off of a counter hit there, because the confirmation on when it's going to count as a counter hit is very fickle and doesn't, in my opinion, make a lot of sense. So that's the way it is. With White Rose, and there's a pretty good chance that I'm going to forget some of these because, again, I don't go for White Rose, but you get what is called the Nobody Blocks This. So we've talked about this, you know, and how it's massively punishable, right? Something that literally nobody blocks ever is 214B, B. Coup de grace. It is called the Nobody Blocks This, Shadows to Sandman. One thing that I should also mention when it comes to, you know, what Amy gets in White Rose, AMSKK, it's like a relatively good move. It's good for, like, Oki and stuff, but if you have White, whoops, you get KBB. Again, another version of Nobody Blocks This. So not a lot of people who are... You can GI the third hit, you can't really step it, you can't really attack through it, and it is safe on block, but you can GI it. Or if you're playing an Amy Mirror matchup, you can just, you know, mid-parry it. What else do you get with White in Soul Charge? Oh, yeah. Full crouch 3B goes immediately into Reversal Edge. So that's full crouch 3B. Is automatically going to put you into Reversal Edge. That's one thing that I didn't mention about White. You can see how often I use White. So, you know how the typical way that Reversal Edges work with, you know, this is that if you're the one who initiated the Reversal Edge and you clash the first time around, then the second time around they're going to, like, if you and you beat them, then you're going to get a lethal hit, right? When you have White Roses, if you were correct the first time around on a Reversal Edge, then you just get the lethal hit on the first go around. The combos don't really change, but you get, you know, a lethal hit retching up, because it is also important to note that Amy has the ability to gain a lethal hit if you hit with 4 lethal hits within a game. So the last thing that I want to talk about with regards to Roses, and I think this is the most important thing, this is the reason why a lot of people have shaped their opinions about whether it's good to go for purple or to go for red only. Red is significantly easier to get. You can get it off of VBA, red, mid-parry AK, red, 1B, red. This will combo on counter hit. You could also just, like, regularly throw it, but not a lot of people are going to get hit by that. You get it off of, like, 4B, regular 3B. A lot of ways to get red Roses, right? Technically, high parry K, if you want. Whoop. That's an awful combo, though. I wouldn't advise doing that. You can get it off of a lot of stuff, including lows. It also is important to note that for the most part, you only get red Roses. Well, you really only get Roses just in general off of verticals. You also get it off of, like, 2-2B, as we showed before, stuff like that, right? With White, you can get it off of 3B. You can't get it off of 3BA. You can't get it off of 1B. You can't get it off of mid-parry AK. So you have to kind of change up what you're going to do in order to get White. So mid-parry AK into Red Rose works. Mid-parry K into Red Rose works. Mid-parry AK into White doesn't, but mid-parry K does for White. The reason why this is not necessarily advisable is because mid-parry AK on block is -2, mid-parry K -12. So you're taking yourself from a potential reverse mix-up out to I'm getting punished. And that can potentially be bad news, right? So the 1B, you don't get a White Rose guaranteed, but you do have a mix-up for it. So if they are not going to... How do I do this again? Yeah. So if they're not going to Yukemi at all, you get that... You get a White Rose. But if they tech to the side... No. But if you think they're going to tech to the side, then 4-4A is going to give you a tech trap into a White Rose, right? So the reason why there's a lot of people who think this is good, but I think it's bad, is that I want you to imagine a situation. I want you to imagine that you're playing against Ivy. The Ivy versus Amy matchup is all about range. It's all about space. Ivy gets to play the game, and Ivy doesn't get to play the game at every single range except for basically as close as I am now to grow. Now, once Amy is in this range, Ivy doesn't get to really do much at all, except for maybe command grabs, but you have tech crouches and stuff, and Amy gets to kind of run buck wild, because Ivy kind of falls apart once you're in her face, right? So let's say you're playing against Ivy, and it's the start of the game. You spend the next 30 to 40 seconds just trying to get in. You literally haven't pressed a button other than G the entire round. You finally get up to your Ivy opponent, and you go for 1B. And you know full well that if Ivy blocks this, then you're going to eat a massive punish. And if she sidesteps this, you're going to eat a massive punish. And if she backsteps this, you're going to eat a massive punish. But you know what? You're going to go for it. And you were right. Then, you decide to, instead of going for your guaranteed rose so that your damage is comparable to Amy's, you decide to go for a 50-50, and you were wrong. And not only were you wrong, but you're about to get whiff punished. So I just spent all that time blocking, and all that risk of the amount of damage that I could get punished with to do 18 damage. 18 damage into a punish, because I was wrong about my tech trap. Is that really good? No, I don't think it is. I think the damage is so wildly out of her favor, I just can't imagine that that's going to be all that good. You can get White Rose off of 2-2 KB, so that's nice. But for the most part, you don't, like, unfortunately, in order to do this, yeah, it's going to be safe, but you see how it pushes me out? There are a handful of matchups where you want to push out, maybe against, Xianghua, or Mitsurugi, or Maxi, or something like that, but for the most part, you want to stay in, right? 2-2K on its own is -2. Why wouldn't I just want to stay in? It's also safe to reversal edge. So, I guess the ideas that I'm getting at, the main reason why I say that going red only is the most optimal way of playing Amy is because, number one, much easier to get. You don't really have to rely on just vertical mids all day, every day, in order to get red. You can go for lows, you can go for horizontals to a certain extent, you can also stay safe with -2 as opposed to -12. With white, you basically are just constantly fishing for 2-2B. And anybody who's anybody that knows how to play against Amy are not going to get hit by 2-2B all that often. That's like the absolute number one thing that all anti-Amy players are going to be looking for. And if they're not, yeah, they're going to lose. But this is my other point, is the fact that, like, every time that I've gotten purple, I could have probably won just with raw damage from Red Rose anyway, so purple effectively becomes like a win more button. I can't remember a time where I played against somebody who got hit by 2-2B so often that I got white and therefore purple, where had I just gone for red, I would have also won, but much quicker. Does that make sense? Like, I could have just straight up gotten red a lot quicker and just won the game off of damage rather than trying to be fancy and getting purple. So is purple really necessary? I don't think so. The other thing to note is that I believe that the tools that you get from red are just significantly more powerful. You can stop people from rolling. You can stop people from coming in on you. The amount of damage that you get on all of your stuff is much higher, so you can beat out GIs, which is like the number one way to try and deal with Amy. There's so much stuff that you get from red. They're already going to be scared about the parries, and if they're not, then you're just not using parries correctly. The Amy stance is legitimately very good, and it's very safe. That's -2. This is -2. That's like -8 or 10 or something. So the parries and the stances outside of the parries are already good in and of themselves. You don't need to make them any stronger. If you need to make them stronger in order for them to be powerful, with all due respect, I don't think that you're using them correctly. They should be powerful enough on their own. I don't think you need the gigantic lethal hits and everything. They're just kind of like a nice perk. So the question is, do you want to be fancy, or do you want to win the game of Soul Calibur? So yeah, all in all, that's how I feel about red versus white versus purple, and that's, you know, the kind of stuff that you get out of Soul Charge. That's how you get the different roses, and yeah.